This is a video I want to make to show you how great this tool is. It's used for removing rear end, pinion bearing, and the yoke. What I'm doing here right now is I'm removing this bearing because I need to reuse the slip ring from this VQ35DE alternator. I want to place the slip ring onto this alternator, which is from a Nissan VG33E engine, and that's found in the Frontier. Now when you take a close look at the slip ring on this alternator, you can see how it's damaged. The copper is completely erased, exposing the plastic. This is not good for continuity because as the rotor, the armature rotate, at some point in the brush communicator you will have this gap, and it will cause the battery and oil light to flicker on the dashboard cluster, and this will let you know that you have a charging problem. Sometime you're going to want to check that oil pressure, but most likely it will be this alternator. So what I want to do is I want to rebuild this alternator. This one, not so much. I just want to use this slip ring because it's the same slip ring size as this one. So like I said, this is the VQ35DE and this is the VG33E engine. So this is the tool that I'm using for removing this bearing, and as you can see, it's pulling the bearing on the outer race. Not really preferable, but we could get away with it. It's not going to cause any damage to the ball bearing on the race. Now you can see this tool have 3 claws and this cage that fix it into position, and then we have this center threaded rod that press on the shaft while it pulls the bearing out. So I'm going to set the camera to show you how this is done. I've already placed the tool in position. I know you're going to be asking what tool is this and where I get it from. Well, that's a secret. You see, if I show you that, other YouTubers are going to copy my video and they're going to make a video with better algorithm, and of course they're going to speak better and they're going to get all the views. So I don't want that. I want to be the only one with this video. So let's take a look at how we're going to remove the bearing, the 2 slip ring from the VQ alternator and the VG alternator, replacing the slip ring and this bearing. This is a better bearing here. Also this one is good, but we want to use this one because this I know is very good. Here you can see I was successful at removing the first slip ring, and what will sometimes happen is on the corner and the edge, the claw of the tool, it sometimes cause an imperfection, but it could be fixed with a file like you see right there. So this is successfully removed. That's the bearing that was on it. That's still our alternator that has to get fixed. That's the rotor, the armature. This is the armature, the center, and this is the stator field. So I'm trying to remove the second one, and what ended up happening is I just destroyed a complete plastic. Now this alternator is not any use to us. As you can see, we're using it for a different application, for receiving 120 volts on the AC circuit, and we don't use this anymore. So I could destroy this here just to get this plastic off, and then I'll be able to just crush that plastic and save the slip ring like I've saved this one, harvesting it. Now this stuff you could buy in the parts store, but in my location you're not able to find this stuff. There's a lot of Indians here, so it's very difficult to deal with them. They don't speak that well, and how can you trust what they're selling? Now, what you need to know here is this is a genuine Nissan part, and it will be much better than a aftermarket slip ring. That is why I'm trying to harvest this slip ring, because it's a much better material for working with the brush communicator. I will show you the brush communicator later on as the process takes assemble. Now what I have to do is just destroy this center plastic piece, and then I'll be able to get this slip ring perfect. You don't want it to get crushed or out of shape. You want to make sure it's perfectly round. This is all the destruction from the plastic that was sitting on here. This is the positive wire that induce the armature feel. So one will go to the lower slip ring and another one will go to the top. Here are the two slip rings that we have salvaged. Excellent condition for replacing onto this old alternator. Now this is no good. I'm going to throw this away. We could reuse the stator feel, but the armature is definitely not good. Definitely. It could be used for other application. Let's say if you want to make it a permanent magnet motor, you could use the rotor for putting magnets on the surface. Anyway, I don't want to get too much into that. So we have saved the two slip ring that we have salvaged from the used alternator. Now it's time for us to remove these two slip ring, which will be much easier than these two because they're already excessively damaged in that area. So we're gonna just damage the ring, taking it off, saving that plastic, and we have to take this bearing off so we could put the new, or I should say the refurbished slip ring onto here. Let's get to that. I know you would like to see the action of this video, but I can't show you that because you have other YouTubers who's gonna copy your tool, copy your style, put better algorithms, speak better, and next thing you know they have millions of views. And this video will be up for 10 years and maybe get 10 views. So I don't really go with YouTube, Google, because I know they're crooks. So this is why I'm doing like this. You're going to have to figure it out, dude. You're going to have to look at, the tools, what I'm doing, and figure it out. You don't have to do it. You could buy a new alternator. I think a new alternator like this is approximately $50 or $100. All depends on the amperage. Now here's one thing you should know. Don't buy this alternator if it's less than 120 amps. Some people are going to try to sell you a 60 or 70 amp alternator. Can't work for fuel injection vehicle because you have to fire the coil, the injectors, fuel pump. Then you have other things running on the vehicle like your radio and wipers, rear defogger, air condition, especially that air condition compressor coil, the clutch coil. That uses a lot of amps, so you need an alternator that's going to put out over 120 amp to maintain performance of the charging system. Let's go ahead and try to get this together, and you can see in the end how perfect it is. And we're going to put the alternator back together. All this stuff, not easy to do. It's tedious, takes a lot of time, but you save a lot of money. See, right now I'm going to spend no money, and I'm going to have a good working alternator with this brush communicator. So that's a brand new brush communicator. So we could expect another maybe 40,000 miles, 30,000. Anything is better than nothing until we could go to work, save some money, and purchase a new alternator from the internet Nissan genuine dealer. Do not go with aftermarket alternator. This is what's going to happen to you. They do not have, those guys that rebuild the alternator really don't give a damn of the hardness of the bushing and the slip ring. So what will most likely happen is you will receive a brush communicator where the material is much harder than the slip ring. This is why the brush creates that groove in the slip ring and damage it. Now on this alternator that we removed the slip ring from, that didn't happen because the engineer at the dealer perfectly matched the brush communicator with the slip ring, so the brush communicator, the brush itself, does not damage the slip ring like it did to this one. Very, very technical stuff, very, very tricky stuff. Only the guys in the alternator field knows how to trick you and keeps you buying alternator. That's why I recommend you use genuine Nissan parts. Save yourself a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of headache. In the process of removing the bearing, this shaft in the center, it's not going to be able to extend all the way down into the bearing because the shaft is a little larger than the inside of the bearing. So what we'll have to do, I'm going to have to place something like this on the inside so that shaft could sit on top here to extend the push on the bearing for pulling it out. So there you go, that's what I'm talking about. I just want to extend that pivot so the bearing is able to lift all the way out. It's not able to do that with this shaft down in here. So by putting this socket in there, it's going to be able to allow me to do that when I turn this top here and hold the cage. There you go. The bearing is removed. This is the new one that we took off of here. And this is the old one that came off of the alternator with these two slip ring that we're going to use. Now the most difficult part is to remove these two slip ring like this, but we're not going to do that. I'm just going to take a screwdriver and try to split it off of there and save the plastic from becoming damaged. Very important that we save this plastic and the wire that's under the slip ring that creates a continuity with the coil field on the armature. That's this wire right here, and we have another one here, right? So it sends electric in on one, and then it goes into the brush communicator to get regulated so it can maintain, I guess it's 7.20 volts that goes into this armature, and that's able to output 14.5 volts at specified amperage. Let's get ready and wreck these two slip ring off of here. It's being done here now. I'm using this file to cut the slip ring in half, and then I'm going to pop it off with this little pry bar. Don't want to use any impact, afraid of damaging the plastic. So the file will be perfect for cutting it. Just keep rubbing the file on it, and then it's going to create an opening for us to just open it like a C and remove it. I'll do it to both of them. That's the idea. You can take this here and just pop this off. Now we have that slip ring off of there. With both slip ring removed, you're going to notice these little copper connection, which is where the wire for the armature circuit is. You get a better look with that high technology camera. So you got one on the top and there's one on the bottom. When we are going to slip this ring onto here, what's going to happen is the back is going to take contact with this here and be able to produce continuity throughout the circuit. So since this is plastic, if the alternator is extremely old, you will not be able to do what I'm doing here. Like you can see this piece of plastic on the edge here broke off. So you're gonna have to get a fairly new alternator, or like I say, buy a new alternator. Here are the two slip rings that was removed, and you can see, you wouldn't be able to tell that they are a slip ring. This is the one from the bottom, and this is the one from the top. And I'll tell you the truth, they're much easier to remove once the brush communicator has been damaged then by placing that groove in there. Let's get ready and replace these two bad boys with this bearing here, and then we could assemble this part back on here. Now you can see that brush, you don't see it anymore. Well, the reason why is because I pull it back and then I push this wire in here. You notice before there was two holes in the brushes, and that's holding that brush back. So when I'm to put that on there, it does not get broken on here. Here you can see I'm preparing the slip ring. I had a partial groove in the center. What I'm doing is I'm using this flat file, placing it flat, and just filing it so I could get an even surface when I pass my finger like that. I don't want to have a ridge on the two ends, because when that new brush communicator is to be seated on this ring, those two edges could cause severe damage to the brush, reducing its life. So this needs preparing, and it's going to be finished with sandpaper to give us a completely smooth surface all around, nice and even. This one does not have it that much. Actually, it has none of it, so this will just use a sandpaper. But if you have a partial line in the center, you're going to need to use that file and just place it flat and pass it just like this, like that. And you keep turning and turning and turning as you're filing it, and then it's going to get into shape. Also, this area here got to get prepared, has to be filed down. And I'll tell you, this is like playing Russian roulette here, because you're taking a chance in getting that terminal there to press against the inside of this ring. So you want to make sure you have a little rise on it, so it could ensure some kind of compression against the inside of the ring. This is something you're not really going to be interested in doing, but I'm just showing you the difficulty and the joy and the fun of doing it, because it's like a hobby and you got nothing to do. And most suckers out there got to work for a paycheck. So if you don't have to work for a paycheck, you know, you play around with this stuff and see how good you are at doing it. Normally it's machine assembly line and robots that will put this stuff together, not people. People are the most imperfect when it comes to putting these things together. If people was to do this, you'll probably have 100 alternator defective and another 100 working. Then they're gonna cast their evil. People are terrible. I shouldn't say people, because we are people, but you get the idea. You know, some of us are. So you can see what had to be done to this plastic. I had to take the flat side of the file and try to shave it down or file it down while turning it and turning it, making sure that I do not file this continuity point, this terminal, down as even as this surface. I want to have a rise, like I says, on this terminal, so we'll be able to have a contact on the inside of the ring. Now let's take a test fit. I don't want this to be slipping on this plastic. I want to press this when I put it in position, and in doing so I'm going to have to pass this first terminal to bring that ring all the way down to the second. This is going to be precise and tedious time when putting together. Installation of the slip ring. You will most likely need some lubricant to ease the pressure when installing, and that's when you want to use this white lithium grease, not like it comes in black. You don't want to use silicone, because the silicone will prevent the connection from the terminal. So the best thing to use is either white lithium grease or maybe some form of oil. Here you will notice what we have accomplished here. is like going to the moon, because trying to put that slip ring on the lower section of that shaft is going to be difficult. So what I had to do is I had to fit it on here first, and then I just had to take a punch and work it on from 12, 3, 6, 9, 12, 3, 6, 9, and sometime I will work around 11, 5, 8, and 2. Now it's fully seated all the way, and once we get the second one in position, we will be able to use our multi-volt meter and place the probe onto the 2 slip ring to see if we have a resistance or value. This will let us know that this terminal is touching on the inside of the slip ring. So now I have to go and install this one on top, making sure that it doesn't touch together. I want to keep that little space in between, and then we're going to have to finish the surface so that brush could run smooth along and does not get damaged. So here we go, we have the second slip ring in position, and you can see it's a little too far down, but that's okay. Same way it was installed with this punch. You're working it at 12, 3, 6, and 9. Just keep going around, tapping, tapping, tapping very gently, and it will make your way down into that position. So you can see the plastic, like I said before, will become broken during the process of doing this. So you have to make sure, if the alternator is very old, it might not be a good idea to do this. It might be better to buy a new alternator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drift this back so it covers that terminal 100%, because we really need that surface to be in contact. We need as much of it as we can to get in contact. It's now time for us to test these 2 slip ring to see if our connection is successful. When I say successful, we want to make sure we're getting continuity from the slip ring within the coil field on the armature for both of the slip ring. What I want to do now is I just want to take my voltmeter and set it on any ohms setting. Then I want to take the 2 probe and just contact them together like that. So we see that display taking place, letting us know that there is continuity going through the 2 probe when they're touching together. Now we'll take these 2 probe, I'll place one on the top slip ring, I'll place one on the bottom, and that is what we want to see. This is telling us evidence that the 2 slip ring are successfully installed onto the armature shaft and is making contact with the wire for the coil field on the armature. Now this armature can be installed into the alternator with the brush communicator making contact with these 2 slip ring for function of the alternator. You must also replace this bearing, which is important for supporting the rear of the shaft. Another thing that needs to be done to finish the surface of the slip ring, which will most likely be, I should say, rough. You want to take a piece of sandpaper like this, 150 or a 200, and you just want to run it like this separately on the top and on the bottom while moving the armature angle, turning it clockwise or counterclockwise. What we're trying to do here is we're restoring a smooth surface to reduce wear and tear on the brush. So this is bring us to the end of this video, and this is something you're not going to want to do. you're most likely going to buy a new alternator. That is the best way to go. But in the event you cannot get to an alternator, this is something you should consider doing, and it will restore the charging circuit. With the bearing in position, now it's time for us to install the cover. Have to separate this stator field from this back cover, and then it could be installed onto the front face of the alternator. So you see that's the pulley on there. The most important part is that you want to look in there and make sure the brush is seated onto the slip ring. So you can see that bottom one is on the lower slip ring and the top one is on the slip ring. This is what we want to make sure. Now when we put this cover onto here, it's going to have a tendency to pull this back for seating the rectifier against on the inside. So you have to carefully check, making sure that the brushes are seated onto the slip ring when the alternator is fully assembled. This is where we have to disassemble the alternator and trace. You could see that dark mark on the brush. That is telling us where the brush is seating when the alternator is tightly assembled like factory. So what you will have to do here, once the alternator is assembled, you will have to spin the front on the pulley so you could create an impression on that slip ring with the brush communicator, the brush. And as we can see, the brush is in the center where we want it to be. So this alternator has passed its installation and inspection. Here we could reassemble the alternator and install it into the vehicle and check the battery voltage and amperage to make sure that the alternator is producing a charge continuity. With the alternator installed, tension of the belt checked. Also notice I'm running the air condition, so it's very important that we have a superior alternator to be able to hold the clutch for the AC compressor. Now I have my multi-volt, or should I say a load tester, connected to the battery, and we can see we're showing 12 volt, which is in good condition. Now I want to start the engine and take a look at this gauge, making sure that the circuit is charging. Okay, so we can see we have a charging circuit at 14.25. It says that's okay. So this is confirmed that the alternator is charging like it should. Also notice the electric fan is removed. We do not have a clutch fan. So when interchanging the alternator, you will need to remove that electric fan. If you don't have an electric fan, you will need to remove the clutch fan and the shroud. This is complete our video. We have made a successful alternator rebuild by replacing the slip ring and the brush communicator. With the air conditioner on, you can see that compressor is pumping. Notice the voltage remained the same. So you can hear that little tapping inside the engine. That's one of the lifters, and that's because we're using this oil. I don't want to display the manufacturer or that media that makes this oil, and that is what's causing that tapping noise. You will preferably want to use an oil like this, 50 weight, since our engine is already at 200,000 miles. Let's take a look again at The load tester, we can see we're getting 14 volts. So much for this high technology camera. Thank you for watching the video. See you again.